Welcome to the deep dive.
Hello.
Our mission today is, it's a heavy one, but it's absolutely essential. We're going to take an unflinching, really detailed look into the crisis of modern work.
Right.
We are diving deep into source material, all about toxic work cultures, severe overwork, and employee exploitation.
And it really spans the entire economy.
He does, from, the polished towers on Wall Street where being exhausted is almost a status symbol,
Right, a badge of honor.
all the way to the relentless pace of Silicon Valley logistics, and
Yeah.
even the invisible, precarious world of the gig economy.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say up front, this isn't a dive into just minor HR problems.
No.
This is about systemic decay. It's about its staggering human cost.
And for anyone listening who needs to understand the scale of this problem immediately,
Yeah.
where do we start? There's one data point that just floors me.
It's the one about attrition. I mean, we're synthesizing research here, and a big one comes from MIT Sloan. And it shows that a toxic work culture is, get this, 10.4 times more likely to drive an employee away than their compensation is.
10 times. More than 10 times.
More than 10 times. Just think about that.
So you can pay people a fortune, but if the day-to-day is corrosive, they're still going to leave.
They will walk. Toxicity is, and this is a direct quote, the top predictor of talent loss. Full stop.
That statistic is like, it's the earthquake warning, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, if companies are spending these enormous sums on recruiting, on salaries, on benefits,
Benefit.
only to see that talent just flee
Yeah.
because the daily experience is unbearable, then their whole model is just, it's broken.
Fundamentally broken.
Yeah.
And the sheer number of people affected.
It's huge.
Nearly 75% of workers have reported being in a toxic environment at some point.
3 out of 4.
And when you try to put a dollar figure on it, the numbers become almost abstract. They're so big.
So what are we talking?
U.S. organizations are losing a staggering $2 billion per day.
Just from incivility. Not even the
Doug.
big stuff.
Exactly. Just from workplace incivility alone. So before we can even think about fixing it, we have to precisely define what this toxicity is, where it comes from, and, exactly what it costs all of us.
Okay, let's start there. Let's start with the vocabulary. Because
Yeah.
when we say toxicity, I think we often blur the line between, bad mood or a difficult coworker
Right.
and actual legally actionable harassment or a hostile environment. We need that baseline.
We absolutely do. And the legal baseline, according to the EEOC, that's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission,
Right.
it focuses on unwelcome conduct based on specific protected classes.
So what does that include?
We're talking about race, religion, age specifically if you're 40 or older sex, which critically includes pregnancy,
Okay.
disability, or national origin. But, and this is important, that's just the federal floor.
The conversation doesn't stop there.
Not at all. Our sources really stress how state laws are evolving. Many states have expanded these categories to include things like a person's weight, their status as a smoker, or even a past arrest record. So for an employer, just understanding what legally constitutes harassment is a much bigger and more complex challenge than it used to be.
So let's take an example. An off-color joke gets told in the break room. How does the legal system decide if that crosses the line from just, unprofessional or rude to being actual harassment?
The key criteria are severity and pervasiveness. It's one or the other, or both.
Severity and pervasiveness.
Exactly. To be actionable, the behavior has to be either severe, so a single really egregious event, or it has to be pervasive.
So a lot of smaller things that add up.
Precisely. A series of sustained, frequent, maybe minor events that, when you put them all together, create a hostile or intimidating environment.
And what does that look like in practice?
Well, it can be anything from offensive jokes, like you said, to displaying offensive pictures, public mockery, put-downs,
Outright threats, I imagine.
outright threats of physical assault, or even more subtly, just constant interference with an employee's ability to do their job without being disturbed. If that pattern of behavior is targeted because of a protected class and it makes the workplace hostile,
That's the legal trigger.
that is the trigger that organizations absolutely must understand.
I really appreciate that the source material goes beyond just the victim's identity. It actually classifies harassment based on the behavior.
Yes.
And that shift from who is being targeted to how they're being targeted
Yeah,
feels vital for actually recognizing this stuff in real time.
it is. It helps people name what's happening to them.
So what are these 4 behavioral mechanisms that we need to watch out for?
Okay, so these categories, they really capture the whole spectrum of this corrosive behavior. The first one is maybe the most insidious in a corporate setting. Abuse of power.
Manager-driven, I'm guessing?
Typically, yes. It's all about misusing organizational authority to demoralize or exploit someone. We see it when managers impose just completely unreasonable demands.
Like
Shifting deadlines arbitrarily with no reason. Asking an employee to do tasks they are clearly not qualified for, like demanding a receptionist suddenly start doing complex software coding.
or the opposite, right? Demeaning tasks.
Exactly. Imposing duties way beneath the employee's rank, like ordering a vice president to go fetch coffee over and over again. And our sources really emphasize that in some places, this category is expanding.
How so?
It's starting to include constant demands during off hours, which effectively strips the employee of their personal time. That's a key part of the overwork culture we're going to get into later.
So it weaponizes the very structure of the company. But what about when it's not about productivity, but about just dismantling someone psychologically?
Well, that takes us right to the second type, psychological harassment.
Okay.
And this often shows up as exclusion, either overt or very subtle, all designed to make the target feel isolated, unwelcome.
The classic high school clique behavior, but in an office.
That's a good way to put it. Think of coworkers or managers intentionally leaving one person out of staff lunches or social events or even key meetings where they need that information.
So it impacts their work, too.
Directly. And it can be more hostile,
Yeah.
like constantly putting down someone's suggestions in public or making them the butt of incessant targeted pranks.
I've heard stories about that.
The sources even cite examples of people leaving disturbing pictures or objects at a person's desk or in their locker.
That's terrifying.
It's meant to be. It targets their mental and emotional stability, making the workplace feel genuinely unsafe.
And of course, in the post-2020 world, the third category has just,
Yeah.
it's exploded because of how and where we all work now.
You're talking about online bullying.
Exactly.
The lack of physical presence in remote and hybrid work has just amplified this. It's so much harder to read.
Because tone and context are gone.
They're gone. We've seen examples cited where a coworker sends, an ambiguous emoji that could be taken as flirty or inappropriate. But more critically, it's the supervisors sending messages at all hours. 10 p.m., midnight, 6 a.m.
It just erases the boundary.
Completely. It erases that necessary line between work life and personal life. The employee feels like they have to respond instantly, and the job just bleeds into every single waking hour.
And contributes directly to burnout.
Directly. The very technology that was meant to connect us ends up chaining us to our desks, wherever that desk might be.
That blurring of lines it's just a core part of modern stress.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the fourth type, which is critical because it explains why these abusive cycles are so hard to break.
And that is retaliation.
Right.
This is harassment that's not aimed at who the employee is, but for something they have done.
So for speaking up.
For speaking up, this is what compliance professionals absolutely fear the most. An employee reports misconduct, or they report harassment they've experienced.
And then they become the new target.
The perpetrators, or sometimes even other managers, respond by punishing the reporter with more harassing behavior.
And that fear of retribution, it must be the main reason people just stay silent.
It's the primary reason, whether it's being fired or just subtle things like being passed over for a promotion or social exclusion. It's why people hesitate. And that allows the original misconduct to just continue, to fester.
It's the institution failing to protect the whistleblower.
That is exactly what allows toxicity to thrive.
So if an organization is sick with this kind of toxicity, what are the tangible, measurable signs in the data that show the culture is genuinely broken?
Well, when toxicity takes hold, it shows up immediately in the metrics. The most reliable predictor, as we said at the top, is high turnover.
A revolving door.
If you have a constantly revolving door, that churn is not a market problem. It's a systemic cultural problem.
And after that,
Closely following that is increased absenteeism. People start taking more time off, often sick time, because the stress and the anxiety are causing real physical and mental health crises.
and then there's just the general atmosphere.
Exactly. The third thing is generalized workplace incivility. Simple, rude, disrespectful behaviors.
Like what?
Speaking over colleagues in meetings, showing up chronically late, having a short temper during discussions, the sources highlight that this incivility, just by itself, is a silent killer costing billions.
And there's that modern form of passive resistance we have to talk about. Quiet quitting.
Ah, yes. Quiet quitting. It's essentially an employee's emotional disengagement. They're still showing up, but they've checked out.
They're doing the bare minimum.
The absolute bare minimum. They scale back their effort, stick strictly to their job description, stop volunteering for things, refuse extra responsibilities.
It's self-preservation.
It is. But for the company, it's a quiet killer. It's a direct response to a demoralizing environment, and it is a crystal clear precursor to eventually losing that person for good.
Let's circle back to the financial wreckage this causes. We mentioned $2 billion lost daily just from incivility. How does an organization like SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, even calculate a number that big?
It's derived from calculating lost productivity. When an employee is subjected to rude behavior, they spend energy processing it, maybe venting to colleagues.
Avoiding the person who is rude to them.
Right, avoiding the perpetrator. And their cognitive bandwidth just shrinks. SHRM estimates that the collective time lost from all those little activities, multiplied across the entire U.S. workforce, gets you to that staggering daily number.
And if you broaden the scope to the full impact of burnout,
The costs they explode. Burnout costs businesses $322 billion annually just in lost productivity. That's work that simply doesn't happen.
and then there's the healthcare side of it, the cost of all that chronic stress.
Absolutely. The stress from toxic cultures adds an estimated $125 billion to $190 billion each year to our healthcare costs.
Wow.
And a lot of these losses are hidden. Up to 89% of burnout costs show up as presenteeism.
So the employee is physically there at their desk.
Exactly. But because of exhaustion or stress, they're performing way below capacity. They're there, but they're not really there. And that's much harder to track than just someone not showing up.
The most sobering part of all this for me is the impact on physical health. This isn't just about feeling stressed. It's about this kind of work shortening your life,
It's about systemic deterioration of the human body. Nearly 75% of workers directly link their poor mental health to a toxic culture,
leading to anxiety, depression.
widespread anxiety and depression. But the long-term physical toll is devastating. Exposure to high-stress, toxic work environments increases your odds of suffering a major chronic disease.
And we're talking serious conditions.
Very serious. Coronary disease, asthma, diabetes, arthritis, by a margin of 35 to 55%.
That is unbelievable.
And if you look at acute events like strokes, these high-pressure environments increase the likelihood of a stroke by 45%.
So when you hear that work stress contributes to an estimated 120,000 deaths a year in the U.S.,
We have to stop seeing burnout as some kind of personal failure or a weakness.
right,
We have to recognize it for what it is: a public health crisis driven by organizational and managerial malpractice.
we've laid out the massive, almost abstract costs. Now I want to move to the horrifying case studies where this pressure becomes literally deadly. And there's no clearer example of the culture of mandated exhaustion than on Wall Street,
Right, investment banking.
where overwork isn't just accepted, it's celebrated. It's a rite of passage.
That culture is so deeply ingrained, it goes back decades, and it's always justified by the immense starting salaries.
You're talking, what, $200,000 for an entry-level analyst?
Sometimes, yes. And the unwritten contract is that for that money, the firm owns your time, almost without limit. The expectation is just grueling, nearly continuous work.
But as the sources show, this pursuit of endless efficiency has these tragic consequences that the industry just can't seem to shake. And Bank of America, specifically, has seen this happen repeatedly.
The Bank of America situation is such a stark reminder of how persistent this is. In 2024, you have the death of a junior banker, Leo Lucanis. He had reportedly been working over 100 hours a week.
And this wasn't the first time.
No, it just echoed the tragedy of Moritz Earhart back in 2013. He was an intern in their London office who died after working excessive hours, multiple all-nighters.
And each time this happens, there are shockwaves, promises of reform.
And yet, the culture resists. It always seems to snap back.
So how does it persist when there's supposed to be rules? Mandatory time off, limits on hours. The sources detail this corrosive system, this off-the-books culture.
And that's where the toxicity becomes active deception.
How so?
Managers, who are under their own pressure to deliver, they instruct the junior bankers to intentionally underreport their hours.
To lie on their timesheets.
To lie. They do it to avoid alerting senior management, who might then have to enforce the official bank policies that are supposed to cap working hours.
So the middle managers are breaking the rules to look good.
Exactly. Junior bankers were working 15, 16-hour days for weeks at a time, but it was all off the books. Some were explicitly told to log minimal overtime, or even to change their computer's clock time to get around the electronic monitoring.
It's so systematic.
The pressure was so intense, one ex-banker in Tokyo described junior staff catching a few hours of sleep in a bathroom stall
Sleeping in a bathroom stall.
because they couldn't risk being seen leaving the building.
That one detail,
Yeah.
it just translates the cold data point of 100 hours a week into this visceral image of human desperation. It's a complete failure of basic human dignity.
It speaks to the psychological trauma of being constantly available. But the most revealing hard data we have comes from that 2021 Goldman Sachs analyst survey.
Right. This was internal data.
Internal data. Painstaking proof of what these young people were enduring.
So let's break that survey down. What did those 13 first-year analysts actually say about their lives?
The hours were just staggering. An average of 98 to 105 hours per week. Per week. They were averaging 5 hours of sleep a night, usually going to bed around 3 a.m., only to be back at it a few hours later.
And the human toll.
Total. 100%. Every single one of them reported a negative impact on their relationships with friends and family. Their lives outside of work had effectively vanished.
And the mental health scores. They tell a story of just rapid collapse.
They really do. The analysts were asked to rate their mental health on a 10-point scale. Before the job, the average score was an 8.8.
Pretty good.
After a few months on the job, it plummeted to a terrifying 2.8.
Oh my God.
Their physical health dropped the same way. And critically, 75% of these young, brilliant analysts said they were seeking or considering therapy because of the job.
This isn't just pressure. This is institutionalized mental health destruction.
That's a perfect way to phrase it.
And the retention risk that came with that data, that must have finally gotten the attention of the executives.
It did, because it showed their future talent pipeline was about to break. If things stayed the same, the likelihood of these analysts still being there in 6 months was only a 3.5 out of 10.
And the survey confirmed all the toxic behaviors we talked about earlier.
All of them. 100% experienced unrealistic deadlines. 83% felt they were being excessively monitored or micromanaged. And a shocking 77% said they felt they were a victim of workplace abuse.
Shouted at, sworn at.
All of it.
So after this internal crisis was laid so bare, what was the actual response from the financial sector? What changed?
The response has been incremental. Goldman Sachs at first just focused on reinforcing existing rules, like discouraging work on Saturdays. They offered big raises.
To try and justify the pressure.
Perhaps more systemically, you saw firms like JP Morgan try to impose more formal limits. They capped junior bankers' hours at 80 a week in most cases.
There's the escape hatch. In most cases.
That's the key phrase. Because as long as middle management still sees the 100-hour week as a necessary rite of passage, that off-the-books culture will find a way around the corporate policies.
While finance shows the horrifying extreme, this crisis of burnout it's everywhere. What are the latest numbers telling us about the scale of this across the entire workforce?
The crisis is deepening. It's moving from a niche issue to the dominant experience for most employees. Reports now indicate that 82% of employees are at risk of burnout in 2025.
82%?
And 77% of U.S. employees say they have already experienced burnout in their current job. This is not a minority experience anymore, it's the majority.
And the generational disparity in the data is really alarming. Why are we seeing younger workers burn out so much faster?
It's a critical finding. Gen Z and millennial workers are hitting peak burnout at just 25 years old.
25.
Compared to the average American worker who hits it around age 42.
So what's driving that?
It's a combination of things. They entered the workforce during unstable economic times. They're dealing with massive student debt, rising cost of living, hyper-competitive job markets.
They just have no buffer.
Exactly. No economic or psychological buffer that previous generations might have had. It leads to this early, intense exhaustion.
And the gender disparity is still there, still a clear marker of inequity.
Absolutely. Women consistently report higher burnout rates. 42% of corporate women said they felt burned out recently, compared to 35% of men.
And that gap is growing.
It's actually doubled since 2019. It suggests a post-pandemic reality where women are shouldering an even greater burden of emotional labor and unpaid responsibilities, both at home and at work, without getting the support they need.
So what are the biggest organizational drivers pushing people to the edge? Is it purely the amount of work?
Workload is number one, cited by 52% of employees. But a very close second, at 41%, is lack of managerial support.
So your boss is a huge part of the problem.
Either they're not supporting you, or they're actively contributing to the problem through micromanagement and constant pressure. The modern expectation of being always on, driven by technology, means the boundaries are just gone.
And ironically, remote work, which is supposed to give us freedom and flexibility, it seems to have made things worse for a lot of people.
That is the great paradox. Remote workers are, counterintuitively, 20% more likely to burn out.
Why?
They often work longer hours. The commute time has just turned into more work time. The lines between the kitchen table and the office have vanished.
You can never really unplug.
Never. The physical and psychological separation you need for recovery has disappeared. The tech that lets us work from anywhere has become the tech that prevents us from ever truly stopping.
If a company just ignores this, what's that unseen cost? That presenteeism we talked about. Can we put a number on the quality-adjusted life years lost?
We can. When we talk about presenteeism, we mean employees showing up but maybe only delivering 50 or 60% of their capacity. The American Journal of Preventive Medicine analyzed this using QALY's quality-adjusted life years.
And what did they find?
For a typical company of 1,000 people, burnout results in a staggering 801.7 quality-adjusted life years lost every year.
Wow.
When you factor in everything, lost work days, reduced productivity, health issues, that same 1,000-person company is losing over $5 million annually. It's an enormous economic and humanitarian drain that companies are just choosing to ignore.
We've covered the mental and financial sectors. Now let's turn to the industrial heart of the modern economy, where this relentless pursuit of efficiency turns into systematic physical injury. Let's start with Amazon.
Amazon is such a critical case study in how technology can be weaponized against the worker. The data from the Senate investigation, led by Senator Bernie Sanders and the HELP committee, it was just damning.
So what did they find?
They found that Amazon warehouse workers suffer serious injuries at a rate 2.6 times higher than workers in non-Amazon warehouses.
2.5 times higher.
6.6 serious injuries per 100 workers versus the industry average of 3.2. That is a massive systemic disparity. It's not an accident.
So what are the specific mechanisms in Amazon's system that cause an injury rate that high?
The sources point directly at the productivity quotas, which are enforced by these sophisticated AI-powered systems.
So the algorithm is the boss.
The algorithm is the boss. It monitors your movements, and it can issue penalties for being time off task.
And that means what? Taking a bathroom break.
Taking a bathroom break, pausing to stretch, walking too slowly between stations. This constant high-pressure surveillance forces workers to rush, to skip ergonomic breaks, and to perform tasks in these high-frequency repetitive cycles.
And the result is an epidemic of a certain kind of injury.
Musculoskeletal disorders, or MSDs. Injuries to muscles, tendons, ligaments. They account for a staggering 40% of all reported injuries.
So chronic back injuries, shoulder tears.
Severe repetitive strain injuries from all that constant awkward lifting and twisting.
And the investigation didn't just find high injury rates. There were serious allegations about how Amazon was handling the data itself.
That's a critical point, the manipulation of data. The allegations suggest Amazon actively discourages injured workers from going to outside doctors.
Why?
They funnel them through their internal on-site AmCare clinics. And while that can seem convenient, it also serves to minimize the number of formal injury reports that would trigger outside scrutiny from regulators.
But they're controlling the narrative.
Whistleblowers allege that staff in these clinics would sometimes blame a worker's fragility for their injury or intentionally restrict access to specialist care. It was all about painting a safer picture than reality.
So OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, they've stepped in. What did their citations say?
OSHA issued citations at multiple warehouses across the country, New York, Florida, Illinois. They found Amazon failed to provide a safe workplace because they exposed workers to high risks of low back injuries and other MSDs.
And they specified the causes.
They did. High frequency, heavy lifting, awkward positions, long hours, all driven by the relentless pace of the system.
So this is a systemic problem, not a local one.
That's exactly what the Assistant Secretary at OSHA said. Amazon's entire operating method creates these hazardous conditions, and they need a fundamental, company-wide strategy to fix it, not just little tweaks here and there.
Let's move to another tech and manufacturing giant, Tesla. Their factories show similar themes. Aggressive production goals from the top that often just override worker safety.
Tesla's ambition is legendary, but the human cost of that hyper-innovation is borne by the production workers. They complain of just grueling pressure.
And we have data on this.
We do. Incident reports obtained by The Guardian showed a terrifying frequency of emergency calls. At the Fremont factory, ambulances were called over 100 times since 2014.
For what kinds of things?
Fainting spells, dizziness, seizures, chest pains. These are all symptoms of chronic overexertion and stress in a really demanding physical environment.
And this isn't just about the pace of work. It's about exposure to known dangerous chemical hazards.
That is the most serious finding. OSHA penalized Tesla in 2024 for safety failures at the Texas Gigafactory.
For what specifically?
For exposing workers to hazardous chemicals without proper training or protection. The chemical was hexavalent chromium,
Which is?
an extremely hazardous material known to cause cancer, kidney damage, and serious respiratory problems. Workers on the Cybertruck body line were directly exposed. It's a severe lapse in basic industrial safety.
On top of that, workers were dealing with extreme heat.
Yes, reports detailed a broken furnace door at the Austin Gigafactory that exposed employees to temperatures as high as 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And that failure went on for months.
It just shows a pattern where production targets take absolute precedence over everything else.
Over comfort, environmental safety, even basic maintenance of safety equipment.
And what happens when a worker inevitably gets hurt and tries to speak up? What's the managerial response?
Multiple workers claim that managers actively belittled their complaints of pain, pressuring them to just work through it.
Is there a quote?
The alleged quote captured in the sources is chilling. "We all hurt. You can't man up."
Wow.
This culture actively suppresses injury reporting, and then there's the financial punishment for reporting an injury.
What do you mean?
If you're assigned to light duty because you're hurt, you get lower wages plus workers' comp, which results in a huge pay cut.
So you make less money if you admit you're injured.
Exactly. Your pay might drop from $22 an hour down to $10. This severe financial penalty effectively forces employees to hide their injuries and work through the pain, which just drives the injury rate even higher and masks the true scope of the problem.
And that brings us to the gig economy, the final frontier of this kind of exploitation, where companies shed all the responsibilities of being an employer by just classifying people as contractors.
While maintaining absolute algorithmic control over their lives.
Let's look at Uber drivers.
Uber drivers are facing immense pressure from all sides. Economically, the pay can be shockingly low. Sources noted drivers sometimes only get $4 for a ride that the passenger paid $20 for.
That's an incredible margin for Uber.
It is, and that economic insecurity is compounded by a profound safety crisis. A major survey found 2/3 of all drivers reported being threatened, harassed, or assaulted in the last year. They are completely isolated, unprotected frontline workers.
And the corporate mechanism for control is just this constant, terrifying threat of deactivation.
The fear of deactivation is the corporate whip in the gig economy. 59% of drivers admitted they take rides they know are unsafe.
Why?
Because they're afraid of a negative review and getting their account deactivated, which often happens instantly, with no investigation, no human involved.
And this disproportionately affects drivers of color.
It does. 72% of surveyed drivers of color reported experiencing violence, compared to 63% of white drivers. Their entire livelihood just hangs by a single algorithmic thread.
And beyond safety, the control is baked right into the pay system itself, which is now facing legal challenges in Europe.
This is a really sophisticated form of exploitation. An organization called Worker Info Exchange has launched legal demands to stop Uber from using its AI-driven dynamic pricing.
What's the argument?
They allege Uber breached data protection laws by using these complex algorithms trained on driver data to constantly vary pay rates. And since this system was introduced, the average real-term pay for drivers has just stagnated. The algorithm is designed to maximize profit for Uber, not to provide a stable living for the driver.
And because drivers are defined as contractors, they are stripped of the legal protections that the rest of us rely on, like anti-discrimination safeguards.
That is the core structural vulnerability. Uber itself faced intense scrutiny for a toxic culture among its salaried engineers, the whole Susan Fowler case.
Right.
But its massive driver workforce lacks those standard protections. Their performance and their ability to earn is judged by passenger ratings.
Which are prone to bias.
Exactly. These systems expose drivers to overt or implicit bias from the public based on race, gender, appearance, anything. And if a driver gets consistently low ratings because of that bias, the algorithm can just deactivate them.
It's termination by public opinion.
Essentially, yes. And Uber knows this bias exists. They've argued against in-app tipping because of passenger bias, yet they ignore that same bias when it costs a driver their job.
Okay, we've spent a lot of time detailing this crisis of toxicity, overwork, and exploitation. Now I want to pivot to the solutions and the rapidly changing cultural landscape around work itself. And we're seeing this definite post-pandemic retreat from that whole bring your whole self to work idea.
That is the major shift happening right now. For a few years, psychological safety and flexibility were the big buzzwords. Now the pendulum is swinging hard back toward productivity, discipline, the bottom line.
The idea of encouraging unfiltered individuality is starting to feel risky to employers.
Risky and inefficient, yes.
So where are corporate leaders drawing the line now on authenticity?
They're shifting toward what the sources are calling guarded authenticity.
Guarded authenticity.
The raw, unfiltered expression of self is now seen as potentially distracting or even legally dangerous, especially for leaders.
So what employers really wanted was a predictable, optimized version of authenticity.
Exactly. One that seamlessly benefited the business. As one expert put it so well, authenticity at work is guarded authenticity, because at work, you can be fired. The risk aversion is driving the whole thing.
And this move back to professionalism seems to be driven by a much simpler, more fundamental need from employees, especially working mothers.
Exactly right. The core realization, particularly for groups that have historically struggled with boundaries,
Like women managing household logistics.
is that they didn't really need complex, flexible work schedules so much as they needed plain old boundaries.
Just a job where the work stops at a set time.
That's it. The crisis wasn't a lack of flexibility, it was the failure to respect the non-negotiable end of the workday. And that shifts the focus from cultural window dressing back to enforcing ethical, timed boundaries.
This cultural realignment is highly, highly charged, especially around diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI initiatives. And our sources present two starkly different narratives for why companies are pulling back. We have to report on both impartially here.
Absolutely. On one side of the argument, the narrative pushed by some media outlets and activist groups sees this corporate retreat from DEI as a far-right shift.
A capitulation to far-right ideology.
That's the phrase, yes. This perspective suggests that the ultimate goal of these rollbacks is a return to a state of quasi-legal racial segregation.
Where race-neutral policies on the surface actually mask systemic exclusion.
That's the argument, that companies are simply folding under political pressure, not adhering to any kind of ethical commitment.
Okay, so what is the powerful counter-argument that's being made inside corporate legal departments?
The counter-argument is that this is a highly strategic move to achieve political neutrality, and more importantly, to insulate the company against what they see as a coming legal reckoning for biased corporate policies.
So they're trying to get ahead of lawsuits.
Essentially, when companies stop what are effectively discriminatory DEI programs like de facto racial quotas for hiring or internships only offered to certain racial groups,
Or using race as a criterion for grants.
they are moving back toward classical race neutrality in hiring and opportunity. For many shareholders, this is seen as better for business, better for legal compliance. It's taking the company away from politics altogether.
And we have concrete examples of big companies making very public pivots on this.
We do. Companies with deep ties to rural American consumers, like John Deere and Tractor Supply, they publicly backed away from external social events like Pride festivals, and they eliminated or scaled back their DEI roles and goals.
So they're trying to signal neutrality to their customer base.
To their investors and their customers, yes. Tractor Supply even announced it would stop submitting data to the Human Rights Campaign and would refocus its internal groups strictly on business activities. It's a clear signal.
But this pivot creates an immediate internal conflict for their own workforce.
A massive conflict. The activists pressing for these changes often assume that rural consumers are monolithically against DEI.
But the data doesn't support that.
Not at all. Survey data shows that a huge portion, 79% of rural Americans, care deeply about how a company treats its employees.
So there's a disconnect.
There is. The companies are trying to achieve financial stability and political insulation, but by publicly dismantling DEI policies, they risk alienating the very non-white and LGBTQ+ staff who relied on those policies to feel safe and included.
It's a balancing act that often seems to sacrifice psychological safety for perceived corporate neutrality.
That's a very good way to put it.
The costs are proven, the damage is quantified. Let's pivot now entirely to the solutions detailed in our sources. How can organizations move past this toxic short-term thinking and build a healthier future?
Well, the reform has to start at the top, with fundamental changes to how managers operate and how they're held accountable.
So, managerial accountability and evaluation reform.
Exactly. This means getting rid of those demoralizing budget-driven year-end reviews, which often penalize people based on a required curve, not on merit,
And replace them with what?
with multidimensional, ongoing evaluation systems that genuinely incorporate employee well-being, team health, and objective performance metrics. And crucially, managers have to face real consequences for violating anti-harassment or chronic overwork policies.
Yeah.
Compliance can't be optional.
And to fight the endemic overwork we saw on Wall Street and in remote work, the sources point to the need for radical time innovation.
The most compelling innovation is the 4-day work week.
We're hearing a lot about this.
The experiments found that moving to 32 hours a week, but paid for 40, resulted in significant productivity and even revenue growth.
And the human impact.
Transformative. 70% of workers reported significantly less burnout. The feeling was so powerful that 15% of employees in one trial said they would not go back to a 5-day week for any amount of money. They called it life-changing.
So it forces companies to decouple hours from productivity.
It forces them to innovate, to use technology to enhance efficiency without just squeezing more time out of their people.
And a flip side of that is making sure people actually use the recovery time they've earned. Because traditional policies, like unlimited PTO, often fail spectacularly.
They do, because unlimited PTO creates a culture of competitive presenteeism. People are afraid to take time off because they don't want to look uncommitted. They often end up taking less vacation.
So we need more innovative solutions.
Like Medtronic's Earn Time to Win Time program, it uses positive reinforcement. The more of your standard PTO you use, the more entries you get into a drawing for bonus days off.
So it gamifies taking a break.
It uses incentives to actively encourage the very behavior taking time off that's necessary for replenishment and long-term retention.
Finally, how do organizations build that foundational culture of civility and safety we talked about at the beginning?
First and foremost, by implementing clear, zero-tolerance anti-bullying policies. They have to define the prohibited conduct, guarantee non-retaliation, and they have to explicitly apply to remote work where bullying is often more frequent and less visible.
And training has to be better than just a tick box exercise.
It has to be comprehensive. It has to explain what harassing behavior actually looks like using the behavioral types we discussed. And it has to clarify multiple safe ways for people to report what they see, whether they're the victim or a bystander.
And allyship training can help here.
It can. It helps empower employees to intervene constructively when they see a coworker being victimized. It disrupts the cycle of abuse in the moment.
And the reporting mechanism itself needs to be engineered to protect against that retaliation we know is so common.
Absolutely. You need secure whistleblower hotlines. You need multiple avenues for reporting: email, phone, a web form. Let the employee choose the method they feel most comfortable with.
And protect their identity.
Protecting the reporter's identity is essential to create the psychological safety people need to speak up without fear. It has to be a coordinated, whole program strategy that sets expectations and provides the infrastructure to enforce them.
This entire deep dive has it's laid bare this profound systemic conflict between the short-term goal of hyper-efficiency and the long-term sustainability of the human workforce.
Yes.
The fact that the financial sector and the physical labor sector are suffering from identical destructive consequences proves this is an industry problem. It's a cultural one.
The core conflict is this: the human resources of time, energy, and health are fundamentally finite.
Not like a computer process.
Exactly. They are not renewable. And when these resources are systematically depleted by management practices driven purely by short-term gains, the long-term cost strokes, divorce, high turnover, brand damage, it always inevitably outweighs the immediate gain.
And it damages the company's reputation.
It damages the employee's health, their family's stability, and the company's integrity. Especially now when 68% of consumers say that employee mistreatment instantly diminishes their trust in a brand.
From the junior banker, Leo Lukines, working over 100 hours a week until he died, to the Amazon worker rushing a Lyft quota and suffering a severe injury because they fear being penalized by that time-off task algorithm.
The stories are all intrinsically linked.
They are. By intentional ethical failures at the highest levels of corporate leadership. When SHRM estimates U.S. companies lose $2 billion every single day to toxic incivility, it means we are literally subsidizing bad management with our health, our talent, and our quality of life.
And the solutions are proven. The 4-day work week boosts revenue. We know we need managerial accountability and robust reporting systems. The challenge isn't finding the solution.
It's enforcing it.
It's enforcing the ethical mindset shift required to see human capital as what it is, finite and non-renewable, requiring respect and replenishment, not endless depletion.
And that brings us directly to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. We have spent a lot of time today talking about how AI and relentless technology currently drive dangerous quotas, micromanagement, and invisible surveillance.
Whether it's in an Amazon warehouse or in the Uber Pay system.
Right. So given the immense power and precision of this technology and the obvious failure of human managers to enforce ethical boundaries, how quickly could these same tools be turned around to actively enforce healthy boundaries? Could technology create the very guardrails that companies struggle to uphold? A hard maximum 80-hour work week for bankers, mandatory time allocated for replenishment, automated triggers for mandatory PTO use. Could the very systems designed for exploitation become the ultimate guarantors of the ethical human boundary? Something profound to think about as you consider what role technology should play in defining the future of work.